Imagine this. A passionate Black journalist is working on a groundbreaking story, determined to uncover hidden truths. But when he's stopped by a group of aggressive cops during a late-night investigation, things take a shocking turn. Their tone is hostile, their questions invasive, and their actions reek of prejudice. He tries to stay calm, knowing the stakes are high. The officers push harder, their threats escalating, until they demand to see his ID and belongings. What they don't realize is that he's been recording everything. As tensions rise, the evidence in his hands could change everything. But will it be enough to hold them accountable? Stay tuned to see how one man's courage and quick thinking reveal a powerful message about justice, truth, and standing up against discrimination. The journalist, Malcolm, had been following a lead on a controversial case, one that could expose serious corruption. Equipped with his camera, notebook, and a small voice recorder, he'd been gathering evidence all night. As someone who had faced discrimination before, Malcolm was always prepared. Knowing his work often put him in tough situations. The cops, however, weren't interested in his story. Their questions weren't about what he was doing, but why he was snooping around in the first place. They towered over him, their voices dripping with suspicion, as if his presence alone was a crime. Malcolm's heart raced, but he refused to show fear. His voice stayed steady as he explained his purpose. One officer snatched his bag, digging through it. Malcolm knew the key to his safety, and the truth, was still in his pocket, silently recording everything /. Malcolm's mind raced as he tried to stay calm. The officer rummaging through his bag pulled out his camera, inspecting it like it was evidence of wrongdoing. "What are you really doing here?" the cop demanded, his voice sharp. Malcolm repeated himself, explaining that he was a journalist covering a public issue. But they didn't care. To them, he didn't belong there, and they made it clear with their body language and tone. Meanwhile, Malcolm couldn't stop thinking about the recorder in his pocket. It held everything: their hostility, their accusations, and every word they had thrown at him. He felt the weight of it like a lifeline, but he knew revealing it too soon could make things worse. The tension thickened as another officer stepped closer, glaring. "You think you're untouchable, huh? Let's see about that." Malcolm's pulse quickened as the officers closed in, their voices growing harsher. The street was dark and quiet, offering no witnesses to what was unfolding. One officer grabbed his arm, tightening his grip as if trying to provoke a reaction. Malcolm kept his voice steady, though the fear simmered just below the surface. "I'm a journalist. I have every right to be here," he repeated firmly, meeting their glares head-on. Another officer smirked, leaning in closer. "You're out of your depth," he sneered. "This isn't your story to tell." Malcolm didn't flinch, but his mind raced with questions. Did they know what he was investigating? Were they connected to the corruption he was exposing? As they began questioning him about names and details he hadn't shared publicly, Malcolm realized something chilling. They weren't just harassing him. They were trying to silence him. Malcolm's mind reeled as the officers' questions became more pointed. They weren't just random cops on a power trip. They knew exactly who he was and what he was working on. One officer mentioned a name Malcolm had only discussed with his editor in private, confirming his worst fear. Someone had tipped them off. But who and why? Before he could process it, one officer yanked out his camera, trying to delete the files. "We don't need your lies spreading," he barked. Malcolm protested, but his words were drowned out by the others closing in. He clutched his pocket, feeling the recorder still running. It was his last chance to expose the truth. Suddenly, one officer's radio crackled with a call. A name was mentioned that sent a visible wave of panic through the group. Malcolm caught it, his instincts sharpening. Someone was watching. As the officer's radio crackled again, the group hesitated, their confidence visibly shaken. Malcolm seized the moment. "Looks like someone higher up wants to know what you're doing out here," he said, his voice steady but firm. He pulled the recorder from his pocket, holding it up for them to see. "And I've got everything, every word you've said tonight." The officers froze, their expressions shifting between anger and panic. The leader of the group stepped forward, trying to grab the recorder, but Malcolm stepped back just in time. "You really want to add assault to this?" he asked, his tone sharp. Before they could react, headlights appeared in the distance. A car pulled up, and out stepped a figure Malcolm recognized, a lawyer he had worked with on previous investigations. The lawyer approached calmly, holding up their phone. "Everything's been live-streamed," they said. The officers went pale. As the lawyer confronted them, Malcolm realized the truth. Someone had leaked his investigation to protect him, ensuring the world would know if anything happened. The officers retreated, but not without one last glare. Malcolm stood tall, knowing justice wasn't guaranteed. But this time, the evidence was undeniable. The storm had passed, leaving the sky painted in hues of soft orange and pink. Mia stood on the hill, her heart still racing from the events of the day. She looked at Jake, who was finally smiling. A real, unguarded smile. They had faced the truth, confronted their fears, and somehow found a way to forgive each other. The weight of misunderstandings, once so heavy, had lifted like the dissipating clouds. Below them, the small town was alive with lights flickering on, as if welcoming a fresh start. Mia's phone buzzed, a message from her sister, Emma. "Dinner's ready. Can't wait to hear what happened." Mia chuckled. She turned to Jake and said, "Let's go home." Walking down the hill together, hand in hand, they knew this was just the beginning of something new, an open door to brighter tomorrows.